right, guys, for your next value exercise, you are going to be drawing one of my very favorite things in the whole world, crystals. I have a wide selection of photos for you to choose from. They range from really simple forms to kind of average, a little bit more complex, to super complex forms. So you'll get to choose which photo you want to use as your reference photo. So for this project, you're going to need your computer that has a reference photo of it, of course, the video that you're referring to. I recommend getting out a ruler. You're gonna need your white colored pencil, a pencil sharpener. I think it's also handy to have an eraser close by, and you're gonna need your black paper. So what we are drawing with these crystals is a technique called reverse value. So value is a measure from light to dark. With traditional value drawings, we use black or gray on white paper, and we're putting in the shadows, and we're using pressure to show a wide variety of shadows and value. With reverse value, you're putting in the light and you're leaving the dark. So you have to be really knowledgeable about where shadows are, because you actually don't want to apply any of the white colored pencil to the shadows, but you want to apply plenty of colored pencil to areas where the light is hitting the form that we are viewing. The drawings that end up happening just look magnificent. Something I want you guys to go into this drawing with an idea with is don't put too much pressure on yourself to exactly get the form right. As long as you're breaking the crystal up into triangles and trapezoids and little pentagons, all those little individual shapes, you're gonna get to show this value that you see here. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're gonna wanna do is I want you to get used to the colored pencil. So you're going to create your very own value scale. You don't have to use a ruler for this. I just recommend it. And what I like to do is turn the paper on the side and use the sharp edge of my ruler and make a line. And I like to measure mine out. You guys don't have to measure yours out, but I really liked the way it looked on my example, how everything was like equally spaced and things like that. So I'm going to do a 1/2 inch. I'm gonna mark every 1/2 inch until I get 10 spaces. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. And then I'm just going to eyeball my line across. You could be really specific and go like this. My perfectionists out there, you probably want to go like this and maybe even use a square and make sure it's done. And I'm going to make a vertical line for the areas of the numbers, and I'm going to write the numbers. I'm gonna write these words that I have. It says light to dark, harder pressure to lighter pressure. And that's just for me to remember when I get down to these darks, I wanna barely be applying pressure, but when I'm up here at these lights, I wanna use really, really hard pressure. So it's just a great reminder for you. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to kind of feel my way through what it's like to make these values. You wanna have the values going from light to dark. So what I like to do is I like to do my 0, which should be the hardest that I'm pressing with my colored pencil. And then I like to start at my 9, which will be the lightest. And I kind of work my way from 1 to 8 to 2 to 3, and just to kind of gradually see like the book ends of where I should be, and then I like to work to the middle. If you prefer to just to estimate it and go from 0 all the way down to 10, you can do that. But 0 should be the lightest and 10 should be the darkest. And if you end up putting too much pressure on something, you can take your eraser, and since you were so light down here, you can kind of erase things if you went a little bit too dark, which I did. So I have a pretty nice looking value scale, and now I'm ready to start drawing my crystal. I'm gonna make sure that my colored pencil is nice and sharp. So a little tip for you guys when you're in the classroom or even at home is I always like to use my pencil sharpener. If you don't have like a little cage for it, I like to grab a paper towel and keep all my shavings on the paper towel. That way I can easily just kind of wrap them up at the end of class and not make a mess on Mrs. Cantrell's or my tables. So when you're working on your drawing, you want to draw just like you guys learned how to do last week. You want to establish the basic form, and you want to break things down into simple shapes. So if you see like a triangle, if you see an oval, because this big shape right here really is an oval, but it just has some things jutting out to it, and you can get more and more specific as you go. If you use your pencil really light, like Mrs. Cantrell taught last week, it's very easy to erase if you happen to make any mistakes. Don't forget to use angling too. Okay, so once you have a basic, my country's coming out, I'm wearing my flannel today. Once you have a basic sketch going on, what you're gonna wanna do, if you have some like lines that you don't like, so for instance, like I have some of my original oval lines, because I drew so lightly, they are super simple to erase. Now, once you start to go really hard with the white colored pencil, it is a little bit more difficult to erase. But right now, if there's any information that I want to erase, I'm going to go ahead and do that so I can see clear boundaries for all these little facets of my crystal. Okay, so now I'm ready to do my reverse value on this. What you're gonna wanna do very first is anything that is 0 on here. So that bright white where you're gonna apply a lot of pressure, you're gonna want to do those areas first. And that's gonna be a really great way to establish value. At the same time, you wanna sort of acknowledge where there is number 10, where there's the darkest value where you're not going to touch. That is the no color zone. So it's gonna be important to recognize some of these areas in the facets of the crystal where I need to leave the black of the paper. Now, I'm also just through observing noticing that a lot of this is going to be shaded, but in some areas there's some darkness. So you want to kind of take a beat, and you want to establish your highlights, and you want to acknowledge your shadows. Okay, now that I've established my brightest whites, what I recommend doing is going by section and starting your shading. So something I like to do is I like to establish a facet or an area, and I like to color the light area first, and then it's kind of like when you push the gas in a car, because you guys are all drivers, right? So you know exactly what I'm talking about. But when you push the gas on the car and you're trying to slow down, you kind of ease off the gas pedal. That's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be coloring a little bit harder in those light areas. And as you move to the darker areas, you still want to continue your strokes, and you want to continue to do that shading, but you've just eased up on the pressure. So it's not like going from an 8 to a 4 really abruptly. You're making a gradual change. And that's why I like to work facet by facet. And it's also important to kind of have an idea of where this is. So if you even need to hold your value up and you need to be like, okay, this is a 5, then you know a 5 how much pressure you need to be using. So that's why a value scale is so great, is you can actually hold it up to the picture and figure out, okay, this area right here, man, really the darkest that it gets is an 8. I shouldn't get as dark as a 10. So it's a really good way to have areas of your picture equal a number, so then that way when you're working on your own sketch, you know what the number is that you're working on. All right, and I would call that done. One little tip about your guys' crystals is everything is pictured in black and white for you, but you can see the difference between these two crystals because this is more of a white crystal. It's this crystal right here, actually. There was a lot more coloring that needed to be done all over, so there was a little less contrast. In a crystal like an amethyst crystal, it has a lot more dark facets, so there was less coloring that I had to do, but there was more like reflections and light that I had to examine. So just kind of have fun with it, and I can't wait to see what you guys create. Good job.